Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Culture Wave Media Network. I'm Sean Villa, and today we are going to be talking about the newly released film Wolfman. I think it's about a week old at the time of recording. So, Wolfman is directed by a gentleman named Leigh Whannell. You might know him from directing the Invisible Man film a couple years back with Elizabeth Moss. That was a thriller film. I remember it being pretty pleasant. I'll admit it has been a while since I've seen it, but I liked his style. I like going into a modern era with these very classical villains or horror movie icons, bringing them to the modern day and doing so in a pretty effective way for his first run through. Now, for his second run through, we are starting off with a January horror movie. And if you know anything about the horror scene, the January horror movie is typically where production companies, especially ones like Blumhouse, which produced this film, tend to drop some stinkers. However, I'm happy to say that Wolfman is not quite a stinker. If anything, I would say that my feelings towards Wolfman are that I barely liked it, which, is not a bad thing. But I went into the movie in full January horror movie cretin mode, crawling around on the floor with my hands sticking to the buttery theater floors, expecting a piece of garbage. And what I got was not bad, which is way better than I had expected. The film stars, we have Christopher Abbott. Sorry, I forgot his name for a second. I had to check my notes. And it also stars Rue from Ozark, but I will call her name, Julia Garner. Both of them do a pretty decent job as the two leads. They're also joined by the young Matilda Firth, who is a up-and-coming young actress. She also stars in the movie Subservience this year. Huge year for her. And it's really this small family horror where they're trapped in a cabin in the mountains of Oregon, and there's a wolfman afoot. Now, that's really all I can say based on the trailer without getting to spoilers. So if you want just a grand oversight before I get into spoilers here, if you want to click off right now, I'll give you the thumbs up. It's pretty decent. If you like horror movies, if you're willing to go into a January horror movie kind of knowing what to expect with that, it's not bad. I think you'll walk away with some things that you really like. I walked away with a lot of things I really liked, and a lot of things that rang as very cliche or kind of like whatever. But if you're into the horror scene at all, you should probably see it. If you liked Invisible Man, you'll probably like this. As a writer, I'm always looking for movies that deal with themes in an interesting way. When a movie has something to say, I almost always prefer it to a movie that is technically superior, but doesn't have as much to say. I think this movie, especially for a horror movie, is actually saying something kind of cool, or at least went into it with a cool intention. So if you're looking for that in horror, go check it out. So with that out of the way, I'm now going to get into spoilers. So let's see. I'm not sure if this is in the trailer, but if you don't know, Christopher Abbott, the main character, is the titular Wolfman. There is a second Wolfman that's kind of creeping around in the background, but very early on in the first act of the film, Christopher Abbott is struck by the Wolfman, not bitten, which I thought was interesting. He's just scratched by the Wolfman, and he begins to slowly transform into a werewolf. I think this is the best aspect of the movie, is Christopher Abbott's transformation into the Wolfman. I didn't know that going in, that he was going to be the Wolfman. I thought the Wolfman was the creature that sort of chases them into this situation in the first place. You get very brief flashes of him in the opening and in the introductory segment when they first arrive into Oregon. You see him on the road, and then he attacks them, of course, when they're getting to the cabin. And then for the rest of the film, he's sort of lingering outside, at least for the first and second act. He's hanging out there, and I figured he was going to break into the house. However, you quickly realize that Christopher Abbott's character is ill, and it becomes apparent pretty quickly that he is ill with, I think it's called lycanthropy, if we're going to go into the fantasy realm of when people contract a werewolf disease. The opening slides call it, I believe, hill fever. So he's sick with the hill fever, which is the werewolf disease, and pretty soon he's going to be a werewolf in this room with his wife and daughter. Uh-oh. Pretty good horror setup. I really like a lot of the things that they pull with this transformation. I think they sort of give him this like wolf vision, where the camera will rotate from the way that Julia Gardner is seeing what's happening in the room, and then it'll switch over to Christopher, and it sort of like blues out the screen. We get like a weird, oh, what I would imagine is a dog-esque visual, where he's starting to see like scent glands or scent marks, whatever you call that, like the little fog rising off of people. I think it's initially pretty cool. And then is my favorite scene in the movie, which is still like probably middle of the road, Act Two, which is where the family finally gets to go to sleep. Christopher Abbott's character wakes up in the middle of the night and he's hearing this thumping, right? This like this noise, and he can't figure out what it is. So now him, as well as the audience, is immediately assuming, oh my God, it's the Wolfman, right? The Wolfman is coming into the house. So he's looking around, and there's this long, drawn-out sequence where he's sort of creeping from room to room. You don't know what exactly the noise is, but he's slowly realizing it's coming from above him. So he creeps up the stairs. It's nice and quiet, nice and tense, pretty much a perfect horror movie sequence. He gets to this room, and that's where he finds that the noise is coming from this closet. Oh my God, dude! He's gonna walk up to the closet. He's going nice and slow. He puts his hand on the handle. Classic, right? He opens it up, and there's nothing in there. So it's very surprising. What's he hearing then? What is this noise? Is it on the roof? Whatever. We have this moment of kind of like shock, and then we slowly zoom in on a spider, which is the only thing in the room, and the spider's there, and we're just on this close up or this extreme close up of the spider, and it's walking like this. It's kind of creeping on the wall. And then we realize that the noise that he's hearing, that sounded so loud that he could hear it from 2 floors down, is the sound of the spider legs touching the wall. And man, what a sequence that is. I think that is fantastic. I didn't expect that at all. I think it's a great reveal. It's where it clicked for me that, oh my God, he's becoming a wolf with like crazy superhuman hearing. The visual is scary. The lead up is scary. The reveal is awesome. Like, it's just really, really cool. Yeah, I love that sequence. And I unfortunately think that that's sort of where the movie peaks for me. And then quickly after that, he goes nonverbal from becoming the Wolfman, which loses me a little bit because I honestly found his character really fascinating. And I think that he was an intriguing character to watch and to listen to. I also think he gives a really good facial performance. Like, before we start putting all the Wolfman makeup on him and transforming him, I think he does a really good job of kind of just wandering in the house, like with the raised eyebrow. Like, he looks very natural doing it. And I missed that. I think we cover his face up, we don't let him talk, and that performance that I was kind of endeared by is lost like halfway through the movie, which, it sort of feels like a bit of a robbery. Not to say that Julia Garner doesn't do a great job herself, she does. But, it sort of becomes a one-woman show after that point. So, quickly after that, after is sort of become the Wolfman, is when we reveal the second Wolfman, this like antagonistic wolf that trapped them there in the first time, scratched Christopher. Now, I think that it commits the cardinal sin of a horror movie, where in the third act we reveal the monster, and from that point forward it goes from being a tense, dread-filled horror movie to an action movie. And it really just kind of loses me. I think the big part of that, aside from the tonal shift, which happens in a lot of horror movies, I don't love it personally, but it is sort of a staple of the genre at this point. Um, I think it's more so that I don't really love the design of the Wolfmen, which I hate to say in a movie called Wolfman, but they're not really werewolves in the traditional sense, which reminded me a bit of Nosferatu about how he doesn't totally look like a traditional vampire. And while I felt like there it sort of worked, here they just sort of look more like zombies. They're like weird and like fleshy and red and sort of disfigured looking. But I don't know, I kind of wanted like a snout or a little more hair. I know that's like maybe a silly critique, but sort of just seeing like a guy who's like vaguely hairy and red looking didn't scream Wolfman to me. Um, yeah, and then we're sort of forced to just look at this guy for the rest of the movie, which loses that appeal of like the shadowy thing moving in the background. Now it's just blatantly fully lit creature on screen. It doesn't look as good. It's not really as tense or frightening because I'm looking at this thing, I see it, and typically unless it's a incredibly designed creature, once I can see it, it's not as scary. It's the classic fear of the unknown, use your imagination, Hitchcock, the real pillars of horror there. And this movie sort of lets that pillar fall down. We're left with a looking monster, and then that's the rest of the movie is this action movie. Now let's get into the themes of this, because I think that's another place where this movie really shines. I have a problem with the way that horror movies are written a lot of the time, especially mainstream semi-indie films. Um, they're almost always about trauma. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think trauma is scary. And when you go into a scary movie, people who are writing it usually look at their own trauma to make the monster based off of or make the horror based off of. Because conceptually, when you're writing a horror movie, you want it to be scary as a concept, not just because something goes ooga booga and scares you on the screen, right? It needs to be conceptually scary to be a really profound horror movie. This movie does something different, and instead of being about just blatant trauma, i.e., I was bullied in school, so the monster represents my bully. The movie is instead saying something about generational trauma, and what I kind of interpreted it as is the fear that you may accidentally harm the people you love, um, without being able to control it. It's sort of this like generational sickness that the main character gets from his father. It's an anger thing where we see very quickly in the movie that he sort of has these like outbursts and he gets really angry at his young daughter, scares her a little bit. Even I think she even cries at one point because he's, just sort of like loses it. And not only do I think that becoming a werewolf is a great metaphor for anger issues, but I also think that it's talking about trauma in a way that is a lot more specific and inherently scary than just, I was bullied or bad things happened to me when I was a kid, or, it's sort of this, it takes all of the elements that work from generalized trauma writing and makes it into something specific and real, which I think is really scary. It actually reminded me of the themes of The Shining, which is sort of this idea that you can harm the people close to you, and that your family are people that, in the right circumstances, you could hurt, despite how much you love them. And that's scary stuff. That's a great place to start writing a horror movie, is to go to that dark place and really look at something that is scary and uncomfortable to talk about and make a movie about that. And it links really well with this werewolf metaphor, because being a werewolf is to lose yourself in this anger and this primal instinct, right? And the movie builds to that really well and really competently. I actually think my second favorite part of the movie is this opening, where Christopher Abbott's character is this young child at the time, and he's out hunting with his father. And when they go out, you see the father has that same quality of just kind of like grabbing him by the sleeve, and he's trying to be authoritative and stern, but it's coming off as like almost abusive, of just like, you need to like stick with me and stay here and whatever. And you can see how that immediately translates into who Christopher Abbott's character becomes, and how that trait, that like negativity, passes down, and that he's aware of that, but he can't stop himself. And that's scary stuff, and that's real. And I think that's just coming from a writing perspective. That's a fantastic way to start a horror movie. On that same vein, in the same note, the actual writing scene by scene kind of varies. I think some of it's really good. I think some of the dialogue is pretty okay. I think it's supported by great acting. But I also think that occasionally it gets really in your face and annoying. As I said, I was just talking about how great I thought these themes were. But there's a scene where Julia Garner's character just blatantly kind of like almost winks to the camera in a way where it's like, hey, like this is what the movie's about. Oh my gosh. And that really just sours on me. I'm not an idiot. You don't have to hold my hand through this. That sort of writing tends to be annoying. And, I would prefer it be left a little open, for interpretation. I don't go to movies to just be told how to feel. I kind of want to be presented with something and then come up with my own feelings around it. And the movie wavered in the way that it did that. There's an ending that is super sort of cliche. The last shot of the movie is they return to this valley that they had been talking about for the entire film as being like a place of peace, and like, oh, no matter what's going on in your life, if you go there, all the terror sort of fades away. This is coming after, Julia Garner just had to watch her husband become a werewolf and then kill him in front of her child. So, maybe the idea of the peaceful valley didn't hit me in the way that it should have, because I just watched her kill her husband. And I feel like that, just looking at a nice ravine might not give me the peace that I was after. But, whatever. I'm kind of nitpicking. I know it's a January horror movie. I know this is supposed to just be a fun time. And if you're looking for a fun time, I think it's fun. The people to the right of me in the theater seemed to really enjoy it. Were laughing where they were supposed to laugh. Were gasping where they were supposed to gasp. The people to the left of me kind of talked away all through the movie, and then I think somewhere in the third act just got up, left, never came back. So, we're pretty split. I think the critical reception is pretty split. I think the casual reception is pretty split. I'm pretty split, which is ultimately where I'm going to land on. I'm going to say 6 out of 10 for this movie. I barely liked it. I would say a 5 is completely neutral feeling. A 4 is, I just didn't quite like it. And a 6 is like, yeah, all right. It's good. It has good elements. It's well directed. It's well edited. It has some great scenes. There's some effective horror in it. Like I've neglected to mention that they use this tactic of hiding Christopher Abbott's character in the darkness. They hide the werewolf, and you don't know that he's there until we see that wolf vision that I was talking about before, where he's literally like feet from the characters that he's pursuing. That's some freaky stuff, and that's really effective. They do effective things. There is some great shots. It makes me want to go visit Oregon. That place looks beautiful. It's beautifully color graded. But it's just boggled down by some very like average writing, some sort of cheesy moments. It doesn't resolve in the best way, I think. They sort of try to do this full circle thing that just kind of, it didn't really click for me. But yeah, for a January horror movie, I really do not think this is bad. I think it's well above average for what it is. And I think that this is a guy to watch. This director, he's got 2 films under his belt, and both are pretty decent and at least well directed. I would like to see what he does next. I'm hoping he goes for like Swamp Thing or something, because we're going into all these like classic Warner Bros. Creatures. Just not the Mummy again, please. No more Mummy. All right, that is my review of Wolfman. If you enjoyed this review, you can check out our YouTube channel. We've got way more videos coming out almost every day. And if you want to support Culture Wave even further, go and check out our various social media. All should be linked below. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Sean Villa, and this was my review of Wolfman. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the movie. Take it easy.
This is The Culture.